The NFL season is on to week 12, and the holidays are quickly approaching. I am Johnny Sports Network, here to provide you with my week 12 NFL predictions. And last week, I went 9 and 5. There are a couple of picks I wish I could have back, but all you can do is move on to the next week. Overall on the season, I am 109 and 57. And this is the week before Thanksgiving. And I was trying to look for some trends on this particular week. And I looked through the past 8 seasons or so of the week before Thanksgiving. And what I noticed is there are a lot of games that are surprisingly close. And right away, when looking at the schedule for this week, I wanted to write down all the teams who are favored by a touchdown or more this week. The Chiefs are favored by 10.5 over the Panthers. The Texans 8.5 over the Titans. The Lions 7.5 over the Colts. And the Dolphins 7 over the Patriots. And the Commanders 10.5 over the Cowboys. Out of those 5 games, I do have a feeling that at least one of them is not going to cover. I could see maybe 2 of them not covering. I'm not saying they're going to lose, but I just don't see all 5 of these favorites covering. I think at least 1 or 2 of them don't. That is just a trend I have noticed, and we will see what happens this week. But without further ado, let's get into the Week 12 NFL predictions right here on the Johnny Sports Network. The first of 13 NFL games this week, as the Falcons, Bills, Bengals, Jaguars, Saints, and Jets all have their bye week this week. Thursday night football, where we always begin. Steelers and Browns. The Steelers, a win last week over the Ravens, an upset victory by the Steelers, which I had called because the Steelers, they always give Lamar Jackson trouble. They go on the road to the Dog Pound to take on the Browns, who are looking to respond after being embarrassed last week by the Saints on the road. The Saints on a 2-game losing streak after being on a 7-game losing streak. I do think it's possible that this could be a letdown game by the Steelers. The emotional victory over the Ravens last week, now going on the road on a short week. However, the Browns, they have been a complete disappointment this season. This does feel like, to me, a trap game for the Steelers. But seeing how the Steelers have played all season long, I think that they will overcome this trap game. As the Steelers, in my opinion, the biggest surprise of the NFL season this year, because they are overwhelmingly exceeding expectations, as we're used to seeing the Steelers just barely crawl their way into the playoffs by being just above 500, sneaking into the playoffs. But now they are 8-2 and leading the AFC North. And I do think the Steelers, despite this being a trap game, at least in my opinion, I think the Steelers, they do overcome the Browns and improve to 9-2 on the year. Chiefs and Panthers. The Panthers had their bye week last week, and they went into their bye week with a lot of momentum on a 2-game winning streak. Even though those 2 wins are against the Saints and the Giants, that is still positive progress for the Panthers. And the Chiefs, they had their first defeat of the season last week on the road against the Bills. And I will say this. I feel like if the Chiefs would have won last week to stay undefeated, I think they would have taken this Panthers team pretty lightly. But the fact they did not, the fact that they lost, the fact that Patrick Mahomes has come out and said that they're going to use this loss to the Bills as fuel and motivation for the rest of the season, I do think the Chiefs win this game. But the real question is, will the Chiefs be able to cover the 10.5 points that they are favored by? I did mention at the top of the show the 5 major favorites this week, favored by a touchdown or more, and the Chiefs are one of them. We have seen on a few occasions this season the Chiefs not being able to cover. I do think the Chiefs, they win this game. On paper, they should win by a bare minimum of 2 touchdowns, despite this being a road game. But we will see if the Chiefs, they do cover in this game, or if it's another instance where they have a hard time covering. Vikings and Bears. The Vikings with a win on the road last week against the Titans, while the Bears, a heartbreaking loss to the Packers. A chance to win the game and defeat the Packers for the first time in a long time, and it was blocked. The second week in a row, a team has a chance to win the game on a game-winning field goal, but it is blocked. And the Bears, they will host another NFC North rival, the Vikings, a Vikings team that has really exceeded the expectations this season, as everything that could have gone wrong for the Vikings in the offseason went wrong. As the Vikings, they've been dealing with injuries. TJ Hawkinson has returned to the lineup in these last few weeks, which that is a major help for Sam Darnold. And I am impressed. I really did think that Sam Darnold was going to start to crumble a little bit, as we saw a few years ago when he started off really well for the Panthers and then everything went wrong. But the Vikings, they still sit at 8-2 on the year and very well in the NFC North race. While the Bears, it was some high expectations for the Bears as they assembled the best team they could for Caleb Williams. And they did part ways with Shane Waldron last week. I would not be surprised if the Bears pulled off this upset. But the fact that Brian Flores is going to have his schemes that have worked almost every single week this season against a rookie quarterback, I am going to go with the Vikings. Although I have seen some people pick the Bears this week, but I am going to go with the Vikings. Up next, we have an AFC South showdown. Texans and Titans. The Titans, they are looking to salvage what they can from this season. The Titans defensively, they have played well. It's just that their offense, they just can't produce enough points to win games. And I do think part of that is the quarterback play in Will Levis. I do feel like if the Titans would have just stuck with Mason Rudolph the entire time, as soon as the Titans won against the Dolphins in week 4, I think the Titans would have maybe 2 more wins on their record this season. They're going on the road, taking on a Texans team with a dominant win over the Cowboys on Monday Night Football last week. a short week for the Texans. However, the Texans, they do not have to travel far to return home from Dallas. I do feel like with what I have seen out of the Titans this season, and with what I've seen from the Texans this season, there has been a couple of games where the Texans, they have just barely scraped by some teams. For example, earlier in the season against the Jaguars, they won the game on a game-winning touchdown with just seconds remaining. They narrowly escaped the upset there. And in week 2 against the Bears, a game where they really struggled in that game, they couldn't make that a runaway game. And that was a game that the Texans, they really played close. And I think that is the case this week. I do think the Texans, they do win this game. However, I think the Texans, they don't cover in this game. I think with them being on a short week, I do think it will work out in the Titans' favor for a bit. But I think it's another one of those cases of the Titans playing well defensively, but their offense just doesn't do enough. Lions and Colts. The Colts announced last week that Anthony Richardson will return at starting quarterback. And the Colts upset the Jets on the road last week with a game-winning Anthony Richardson touchdown. And now they will host the juggernaut in the NFC, the Lions. The Lions, they have been absolutely decimating teams this season. Last week, a 52-6 win against the Jaguars. And the Lions, they are one of those mega favorites this week, favored by more than a touchdown. And I do think this game is going to be a little bit like the Bills and Colts game a couple of weeks ago. Going into it, I did say that I do think it's possible that the Bills will be looking ahead to the Chiefs that next week, and they would take the Colts a little lightly. Well, the Bills, they only won that game by 10, but they were trailing in that game in the middle of the second quarter. And I do think that that will be the case for the Lions. I think it's going to look like the Lions aren't going to cover in this game, but I think at the end of it they will. The Colts, they've just been playing musical chairs with quarterbacks this entire season. And ideally, I think the Lions, they do win this game by 10 points, just like the Bills did a couple of weeks ago. Because I think the Lions, they may be looking ahead to that Thanksgiving Day game a little bit that next week, given the Lions' not so good history on Thanksgiving Day. I think they may take the Colts a little lightly, considering they are off a 52-point performance against the Jaguars last week. But the Lions, I do think they will still win. Patriots and Dolphins. The Patriots with a loss against the Rams last week, but it was a game that they did keep close. While the Dolphins, a win over the Raiders, as the Dolphins, they have now won 2 in a row, and it is starting to look like they have figured things out on the offensive side of the ball. Tyreek Hill now has scored a touchdown in 2 consecutive games. I did say that with Tyreek Hill finding the end zone against the Rams the week before that I do think it will translate into him scoring more touchdowns as the season goes along, which that is what you want to see when you are trying to figure things out offensively. The Dolphins, they are one of those mega favorites this week, favored by more than a touchdown, favored by exactly 7. And the Patriots, we have seen on a few occasions this season where defensively they've played really well. And when the Patriots play well defensively, The Patriots, they have a strong chance of pulling off the upset. Does Drake May have what it takes to pull off this upset? Can he do enough in this game? Because I do think that this is going to be a Patriots cover. I think the Dolphins, they do win this game. However, I think we're going to see once again the Patriots play well defensively, but their offense just won't be able to generate enough to win this game. But this would be an ideal game for the Dolphins to lose, as we do see this all the time. When it looks like teams, they have started to have things figured out, when they start to go on these winning streaks, they end up losing a game that we do not see coming at all. I think the Dolphins win, but I think the Patriots, they do make the game close, and they do cover those 7 points. Up next, we have the Buccaneers and the Giants. Both teams had their bye week last week. For the Buccaneers, Mike Evans has returned to practice, as he has missed the last few games due to a hamstring injury. While the Giants, they are making a quarterback change. Daniel Jones is being placed on the bench, and they will be starting Tommy DeVito at quarterback, as there are reports that Brian Daboll has been informed that his job is on the line, and that is why he has chosen Tommy DeVito over Drew Lock as the starting quarterback moving forward for the Giants. And last year we saw Tommy DeVito in a few games, and he did look really decent. And the Giants, they did win some games with Tommy DeVito. And I do think it is the smart move for the Giants to start Tommy DeVito instead of Drew Lock. Seeing what we saw from Tommy DeVito last year, the Giants, they pulled off some wins that not a lot of people expected. And the Giants this season overall, they really have only played 2 bad games this season, and it was the Vikings in week 1 and the Eagles. The Giants, a lot of the times, they will put up valiant efforts, which they have throughout most points of the season. While the Buccaneers, they find themselves 30th in total defense. 30th out of 32 teams. So they are at the bottom in defense from a stats and numbers standpoint. I may be the only one that will pick the Giants this week. And I said earlier in the season that I can't trust the Giants to win a game. But there's just something about this game that just screams the Giants are going to pull off the upset. And I may be the only person you see this week picking the Giants to win. But I really felt the same way about the Saints over the Falcons 2 weeks ago. And that upset, it did take place. I think we have an upset here. I am going with the Giants to pull off the upset. Cowboys and Commanders. The Cowboys embarrassed on Monday Night Football against the Texans last week. And if things just couldn't be any worse for the Cowboys, it turns out the Cowboys are the only team in all of professional sports to not have a win at home this year. And they go on the road to take on a Commanders team that is without a doubt a very angry team, as they have lost 2 in a row to the Steelers and the Eagles in back-to-back weeks. Last week against the Eagles on Thursday night, I really do feel like the Commanders, they did get in their own way in that game, as they were in the game until the middle of the fourth quarter. Down 12-10, 4th and 2, in field goal range, and they passed on the field goal opportunity and decided to go for it on 4th and 2, and they did not get the 4th down, and that is what ultimately changed the entire momentum in that game. And now the Commanders, they are one of those big favorites this week, favored by 10.5. And I have honestly seen nothing from the Cowboys this season that can convince me that this game will even be close. I think the Commanders, they'll be just fine at the bare minimum. They win this game by 2 touchdowns. And that is just the bare minimum, as the Cowboys, this season for them is just pretty much a lost cause. I don't think there's anything the Cowboys can do to salvage this 2024 season. Essentially, just move on to the next, and they'll probably part ways with Mike McCarthy. That is, if Jerry Jones genuinely wants him to be out as the Cowboys coach, considering that Jerry Jones will only hire yes men. And it did take him over 15 years to part ways with Jason Garrett. But the Commanders, they do win very convincingly, as the Cowboys season is just a lost cause at this point. Broncos and Raiders. The Broncos with a dominant win over the Falcons last week. A dominant performance by Bo Nix. And I said way early in the season that Bo Nix has a lot of potential in the league. If he would just not turn the ball over so much, the Broncos, they will win games. And win games they have. And the Broncos, they currently sit at 6-5 on the season. They are well in the mix in the playoffs. And the Broncos, they could have a better record than 6-5 this point in the year. Bo Nix has been managing these games really well this season. And they go on the road taking on a Raiders team that has had a disappointing year. The Raiders, another team that is just trying to salvage anything they can in this 2024 season. I am going to go with the Broncos in this game, as they have a lot of momentum from the last few weeks. Even though they did have the heartbreaking loss against the Chiefs 2 weeks ago, this Broncos team, they have really been hitting the right buttons ever since the slow start to the year. And I think the Broncos' momentum, it continues. 49ers and Packers. The 49ers with a heartbreaking loss against the Seahawks last week, having the lead late, but the defense surrendered the game-winning touchdown with just seconds remaining. Nick Bosa and Brock Purdy were both injured in that game. Nick Bosa does have an oblique injury, and he is expected to miss some time, at least expected to miss this week. While the Packers, an emotional victory over the Bears on the road last week, a game where it looked like they were going to lose, but a blocked field goal to win the game. The Packers, they escaped the Windy City with a victory. And now the Packers, they host the 49ers as a 2.5-point favorite. And the Packers, they went wire to wire with the 49ers in last year's playoff game. A Packers team that, despite the lack of experience, they went wire to wire against the eventual NFC champions. And I do feel like with Nick Bosa expected to miss this game. However, Nick Bosa is one of those players in the league that if he feels like he can play, he will. But without him, I feel like the 49ers defense is going to be lost. I think the Packers, they do win this game without Nick Bosa on the defensive line. I just don't see the way out for the 49ers being out with on Nick Bosa's leadership in that defensive huddle and on the field. I just don't see it for the 49ers. I think the Packers, they win this one. Up next, we have an NFC West showdown, an NFC West division that is the most competitive division in the league. Cardinals and Seahawks. The Cardinals, they had their bye week last week, while the Seahawks, an emotional win over the 49ers. A 49ers team that has had the Seahawks number in recent years. And for those of you who tune in regularly, I apologize because I am going to say something that I say almost every single week, where the question is, which Seahawks defense is going to show up for this game? Because one week, the Seahawks, they can look like a top-tier defense in the league. It looks like the Legion of Boom is back. And then the very next week, they can look like a bottom-tier defense in the league where they can't get a stop, where the defense just struggles the entire game. I feel like with the Cardinals, with them being a very unpredictable team in the league, I have voiced how the Cardinals, they are, at this moment, the most unpredictable team in the NFL. I'd say the Seahawks and Steelers are the top three as far as unpredictable teams in the league. Because the Seahawks and Steelers, it's about which defense shows up most of the time. And with the Seahawks, it's that again. I am going to go with the Cardinals in this game, although this is the one game this week that I personally would not mess with if you are one of the betting people out there, because this game has completely shifted to my knowledge. The Seahawks, they were favored by 1.5 at one point. Then late in the night, the Cardinals, they were shifted to a point favorite, depending on where you're looking. And now it has shifted back to the Seahawks being favored by 1.5. So this game, essentially, I do feel is a pick 'em, and I am going to pick the Cardinals. Sunday Night Football, Eagles and Rams. The Eagles are currently on a 6-game winning streak after starting the season 2-2. And I do think the win last week against the Commanders, I do think we're going to start seeing some people show a little more respect toward the Eagles, as I have seen some people be very critical on the Eagles during the winning streak, as many feel like they haven't won against any of the good teams, and that's the only reason why they have had the winning streak they've been on, as the Browns, Giants, Bengals, Jaguars, Cowboys, and Commanders are the Eagles' last 6 opponents. And if you look at those opponents, Browns, Giants, Jaguars, Cowboys, those are the worst teams in the league right now. The Bengals win, I do think, is very respectable, as well as the Commanders win last week. And the Rams, they are in the NFC West, the competitive division in the league. A division that I think will, without a doubt, go all the way down to the final week of the season. And I did say a few weeks ago, if the Rams did not become sellers at the trade deadline, they would be in the playoff race. They'd be able to make a playoff run with how competitive the NFC West is. And I do think this could be a potential trap game for the Eagles. The reason why I don't think the Eagles, they will lose this game. I do think they will have the extra rest factor to their advantage, playing on Thursday night last week. And I do think that is the difference in this game. And I do think the Eagles, they do get the win. And I think what is going to end up being one of the best games of the week. I will be surprised if this game is a runaway game on either side. I am going with the Eagles to make it 7 in a row. Week 12 concludes with Monday Night Football. This week for Monday night, we have the Harbaughs, Ravens, and Chargers. And I am really glad that we have this game on Monday night. Going into the schedule release for the season back in May, I was really hoping that this game would be on Monday night, as I felt like it only would have been right. And I was not having any interest in last week's Monday night game. But this week, I am absolutely tuned in from start to finish. And I have to give a lot of credit to Jim Harbaugh. He has really turned around this Chargers franchise really quickly. And he has really led the Chargers into discovering a new identity. As we have gotten used to the Chargers over the years, being on the losing end of so many one-possession games. And last week against the Bengals on Sunday night, we almost saw that happen. The Chargers, they had an early lead in the game. They were dominating, but then the Bengals, they were getting right back into the game. They even had the game tied. But then the Bengals special teams woes, as 2 missed field goals by Evan McPherson, it led to the Chargers' game-winning touchdown with just seconds remaining. And now the Chargers, they host a Ravens team that is off of a loss to the Steelers on the road. The Steelers has really been a kryptonite for the Ravens over the years. And the Ravens defense, they have been giving up a lot of points this season. The Ravens, they are second in the NFL in run defense, but passing defense, they allow an average of 284 passing yards a game, which is last in the league. Total defense, the Ravens, they find themselves 26th in the league. While the Chargers, they lead the NFL in scoring defense. And last week, it was the first time the Chargers have given up more than 20 points in a game. And I do think the Chargers, they do pull off the upset. And Jim Harbaugh, he gets revenge and redemption from the Super Bowl when we saw the Harbaughs go against each other. I just don't think I can trust the Ravens defense right now, because they have been giving up a lot of points. And if the Chargers are having their way the line of scrimmage, I think it's going to be a very long night for the Ravens. I am going with the Chargers to pull off the upset. And that will do it for my Week 12 NFL predictions. Comment your predictions down below. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, enjoy the games this weekend. And remember, Vegas is always watching.